Let's see. We are back here, D Shap in the morning on this fine Friday, TGIF on a busy Friday. And by the way, we have John Francis, the owner of Competition Shooting Supplies, 435 Benefit Street, Pawtucket, Rhode Island, of course. And by the way, 2 days ago was your birthday, but this is even on Friday, so happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
Yes, and of course, so you be the owner of a gun shop. What is your topic of conversation today? Because this is your segment.
Well, that'll vary quite a bit depending on who you're talking to. But usually it's as of late, it's been the some of the anti-gun laws that the progressive politicians here in the state have passed. Most recently, I'm sure a lot of your listeners who are into firearms or in the shooting sports here in Rhode Island are well aware. So Rhode Island passed a magazine ban. That is, they banned the sale, transfer, and possession of any magazine or other feeding device over 10 rounds back in June of last year. There was a 6-month grace period by which everybody had to either get what they had out of the state, permanently modify it so that they did not hold more than 10 rounds, and by permanently modify, you had to either install a block inside the magazine to prevent more than 10 from going in, and you had to either rivet or epoxy that block permanently into the body of the mag. You could destroy them or turn them over to a dealer like myself or the police. No compensation was provided for. No grandfather clause was provided for, which is why a lawsuit was filed in June of last year. And then the litigants asked for an injunction hearing against the state in August. The hearing for that was November 3rd of 2022. The judge issued his decision December 15th, just a mere 3 days before the ban went into effect, and it was an emphatic no on his part. So as it turns out, the judge, in my opinion, he's an activist judge. He's creating law from the bench. He completely ignored the tenets of the recent, New York, the Bruin hearing that the Supreme Court decided on, right after the governor signed the bag ban into law.
Sure.
Which, so the Bruin case, the Supreme Court said that the, state of New York could not infringe on a person's right to obtain a license to carry outside their home for personal protection, because the state of New York was requiring a showing of need. But the bigger issue with the Bruin decision was that the court said that the lower courts could no longer use the intermediate scrutiny or two-step method to determine whether or not something violates the Second Amendment or not. So they said that's one step too many. You can only use a single-step method called strict scrutiny, by which the lower court has to go by the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment dating back to 1791 through, I believe, 1826. Might be maybe as late as in the 1860s. But so they had to look back and see whether or not the government back then, was prohibited or banned items like we're talking about today.
Sure.
And so the other thing, this judge, it turns out Politico did a story on him back in 2010 when he got nominated for the federal bench. And unlike any other judicial nominee in the country going back decades, this guy has donated a ton of money to progressive Democrat coffers.
Right.
Most judges don't, at the most, maybe $50,000 in donations over the course of their lifetime.
Yep.
Maybe. This guy donated almost $1 million.
Right.
So it clearly shows what side of the spectrum he's on, and the fact that he gave the gun folks only a mere 3 days in which to not even 3 days, 1 day to file an appeal.
Right.
So yeah, you read his opinion, it clearly shows his bias. So the law firm here in Rhode Island who is handling the case is going to either has or will be filing an appeal, and they've hired the same law firm who handled the Bruin case in New York. So that same attorney who won the Bruin case is going to be arguing for the gun owners here in Rhode Island in the Federal First Circuit Court of Appeals. So I believe the First Circuit is going to really have a hard time putting aside his arguments in favor of the gun owners. And frankly, the state's position is that the magazines are not an integral part of the gun.
Really?
And therefore are not required for its operation, and so therefore they can regulate it like a stock.
Wow.
They could not be more uninformed.
Wow.
I mean, any magazine-fed firearm, and I don't care if it's a semi-automatic, if it's a pump action, a lever action, or a bolt action, the magazine is exactly the heart of that feed system. It was designed, manufactured, advertised, and sold with that magazine being a magazine-fed repeater.
Sure.
So without it, it is no different than the original single-shot muskets that we had in the beginnings of this country.
Yep.
So they're grand straws with that one. The state of California is using the same ridiculous argument in their fight to keep their magazine ban. And frankly, the California mag ban is going to be declared unconstitutional either by the end of January or the end of February at the latest.
Right. Wow.
So the same judge that's hearing that case in California is also hearing their assault weapons case and a couple of others. So four gun cases that this judge is handling. The state attorney general in California has already walked away from one of them because he can't win.
Sure.
He declared. He said, "I'm not going to expend any more taxpayer money fighting a case we can't win." Governor Newsom, he's not taking no for an answer, so he's decided to continue wasting taxpayer dollar, and he's put his own legal team on trying to win that case, which is unwinnable.
And I'm impressed because you have so much knowledge too for the other states too, and this is being heard on many platforms across the country. So I'm glad you have the knowledge, Mr. John Francis, of what's going on in this country, not just the state. I'm glad you have the knowledge of what's going on all across the country.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're not informed, you don't know what's going on. And the thing is, it directly affects my business.
Sure.
I mean, yes, dealers, FFL storefront dealers were exempted under the law, but what do you do?
Exactly.
Because they say, well, you can still sell to law enforcement. Well, I hate to rain on their parade, but police, for the most part, don't shop at the gun stores with the frequency that regular civilians do.
Exactly.
Because they don't have to. All their equipment is given to them by the cities and towns they work for, including their ammunition.
Sure.
So here in Pawtucket, officers don't need to come to a store to really buy ammo. They can get a box or two of free ammunition from the department anytime they want to go practice.
On the same note, how often do police officers go in your store and buy something?
Frankly, maybe once a month.
Okay.
Twice a month, maybe.
So mostly civilians.
I want to say the vast majority of street cops they're not regular shooters.
Okay.
For them, their service pistol, it's another tool that they got to carry, and that's it. A lot of them don't even practice,
Sure.
from what I understand, or at least from what their fellow cops tell me.
Yeah.
But very, very few police officers are what we would call gun guys.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not into it. So that leaves everybody else. So I've got at least 100, if not double that, as far as guns with magazines that are affected that I can't sell.
Sure.
So my choices are I can sell the guns without the mags, which means I pretty much got to lower the price to offset that, which means I lose money on that gun.
Wow.
Or I swap out the mags with 10 legal 10 rounders, which again, I'm going to lose money because I had to outlay even more to be able to sell or transfer the gun, and I'm left with magazines I can't sell.
Sure.
And so, these whiz kids up at the State House, oh, well, you just sell them online. Oh, really? Well, I don't sell online.
Right.
I do have a website which, talks about my business and whatnot, but I don't do e-commerce because I typically have my hands full just dealing with people walking in through the door.
Right.
So not that many dealers in the state actually sell online.
Right.
So we're stuck with thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars of inventory that I can't move. So what am I supposed to do?
Exactly.
And now they're talking, so they're getting ready to introduce another whole slate of gun ban bills for this session, the biggest of which is going to be an assault weapons ban.
Yep.
And this thing is going to be so broadly worded, virtually anything semi-automatic is going to be eliminated.
Wow.
So it will essentially drive every single dealer out of business.
If that does happen, I mean, how long is that process will take if that does happen?
I would say, depending on how fast they want to screw everybody over, they could make it happen probably within a couple of weeks.
Are you really?
Oh, sure. They can move as quickly as they want. And so for all the folks that are going to be listening out there, just watch go back and look at how they passed the magazine ban last year.
Right.
So it got passed on the House side, and then it went through. Then the Senate version went through the Senate Judiciary Committee, which both sides, their side and our side, lobbied the committee members to cast a vote, our way.
Right.
And when it came down to it, we won that fight, fair and square.
Sure.
They had a chance to lobby those committee members for a week. So did we.
Sure.
And so, it ended up being we won by one vote or something like that.
Yep.
And so, that essentially killed those three anti-gun bills for the year.
Wow.
But that wasn't good enough. That, unfortunately, fair play doesn't mean anything to those corrupt people. And I'm trying to be nice here because it angers me how they did, in the manner in which they did this.
Right.
So Senate President Ruggiero, using a little to unknown Senate rule that's been there for God knows how long. So with a 2/3 majority vote of the senators on the floor, they can grab the approved companion House bill and bring it over to the Senate floor for debate and a straight-up vote.
Wow.
Completely bypassing all the committees.
Yep.
So that's exactly what they did. And it went right along the straight line party vote. No surprise there because Democrats have been controlling Rhode Island for 70+ years now.
Sure.
So that's how the magazine ban got passed.
Wow.
So using that process alone, the Democrats in this state can pass whatever legislation they want. The committee process is irrelevant. They can completely bypass it, sidestep it, ignore it.
Yep.
So your vote, folks, your vote actually doesn't mean squat to these people. Your opinion means nothing to them as well.
Wow.
And so it really surprises me last November when the vast majority of these progressives, and even more of them, got reelected or elected to the state house.
Wow. Yeah.
So either the population of the state has shifted way to the left,
Yep.
which I'm finding a little difficult to believe, or the process in this state is corrupt and crooked as shit. Pardon my French.
No, and you can swear online. This is online radio, you know. But you know, it's probably the corrupt thing, because you know I just had a person on from 3 days in a row from the ACI, and a lot of corrupt stuff going on in the state in general, in the world. I mean, Rhode Island's known as the most corrupt state in the union, but this whole country is corrupt. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
For that matter, you know.
And so ultimately, an assault weapons ban, it's not going to stand up in court.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that, based upon the tenets of the Bruin ruling, going by the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment, a ban like this is just, I'm sorry, it's not going to stand up. And their argument that, like AR-15 type rifles or AK type rifles, but the AR-15 in general, because that seems to be the model that the anti-gun left seems to mostly focus on.
Right.
They're going to try and call it or deem it a dangerous and unusual firearm.
Wow.
Meaning it can be regulated so that it can be regulated under the 1934 National Firearms Act.
Sure.
Which the Bureau of ATF oversees. Well, I'm sorry, but the AR-15 is not a dangerous and unusual weapon. In fact, it became so popular and prevalent by the late 1990s, the press started calling it America's rifle.
Wow.
And frankly, for those out there who are curious, well, gee, how did the AR-15 get so popular?
Right.
Blame Bill and Hillary Clinton for that one.
Hey.
Really, because the Clintons pushed the 1994 crime control bill,
right,
which was affectionately known as the Clinton gun ban.
Yep.
Which, put a 10-year moratorium on the sale, manufacture, and transfer of so-called assault weapons.
Sure.
That is, rifles that had, a flash hider, a bayonet lug, and an adjustable stock, a pistol grip, and the ability to accept a detachable magazine.
Sure.
So, right off the bat, manufacturers completely went around the law by producing the very same rifle with no flash hider, no bayonet lug, and no collapsible stock in a 10-round magazine.
Sure.
So, it didn't slow down the industry in iota. And over that 10-year time period, the only thing that they really accomplished on the anti-gun side was they jacked up the prices of all the existing original type models for that time frame.
Wow.
That's all they did.
Hey,
and the Department of Justice was commissioned by Congress near the end of that 10-year time frame to do a study on the effectiveness of the crime bill. How much violent crime nationwide did it stop or did it lower?
Yep.
And much to no one's surprise, the Department of Justice came to the conclusion that the crime bill slowed down violent crime not one bit.
Wow.
Not one bit. It had almost no effect on violent crime, and the number of cases that the government prosecuted, people for illegal use or possession of so-called assault weapons was so little
Yep.
that the average case costs taxpayers between $10 and $20 million.
Wow.
I say we got a bargain there.
But by the way, before I let you go, I gotta ask you about the Alec Baldwin issue, right?
Yep.
Do you think that is justified for him to get involuntary manslaughter for shooting his that person on set?
Well, I don't know all the facts
Right.
in that case. I've not seen all the evidence that they have, but I do know this. Mr. Baldwin has been involved in Hollywood for how many decades?
A lot.
How many movies has this man been involved in that involved his handling and use of firearms during the filming?
Yep.
So, I don't care whether it's a prop gun or a real gun. The tenets of gun safety are all the same.
Okay.
You always assume that gun is loaded. You keep your finger off the trigger and you keep that muzzle pointed in a safe direction until you're actually ready to fire on a live target.
Sure.
Now, for him to claim that it was the other people, the armorers and the armorer and her assistants, that it was their job to make sure that he was given what they call a cold gun,
right?
Meaning one that's safe, is bullshit.
Yep.
He had a responsibility as the last one handling that gun. That if you're going to point it at one of your fellow actors, you better damn well make sure before the director says action that it's safe.
Sure.
He knows better.
Yep.
You're not going to tell me he shouldn't know better because he's been doing this a long time. And he was using, from what I understand, a modified single-action cowboy-style revolver.
Right.
Well, for those folks that don't, understand that, so the cowboy style is being single-action, meaning you have to cock the hammer first, fully, and then pull the trigger for the gun to fire.
Sure.
Under normal circumstances. Now, from what I understand, this particular revolver that they were using did not have a modern transfer bar safety installed into it, like all the modern ones do. So what that means is, if the hammer is all the way forward, the firing pin that's attached to it is going to be protruding into the chamber area and literally resting right on a live primer.
Wow.
So, which is why back in the 1800s, it was common for, cowboys and or gunslingers to have that hammer down on an empty chamber.
Yep.
So, in fact, they didn't have 6 rounds in their gun. They only had 5.
Sure.
For safety reasons.
Yep.
Now, the other thing, with a revolver that does not have that transfer bar safety, if you're pulling the hammer back and that hammer slips out from under your thumb and flies forward, it's going to light the gun off without you ever touching the trigger.
Wow.
So his statement that he never touched the trigger to me is entirely and very possibly true.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that the gun is still not going to function.
Right.
And in fact, I believe the testing of that gun during the forensics examination proved that point.
Yep.
So, he's got a lot of explaining to do on that one. So, do I think he intentionally meant to hurt anybody? No, I don't think that. But do I think it's possible that he was negligent in his actions? Yes.
Yes. And that's probably what the jury will come to find out too. So that's an interesting story in weeks and months to come. The Alec Baldwin issue with that too.
And frankly, I'll be shocked if he does any jail time.
Really? Do you think as a gun shop owner, do you think he deserves jail time for that?
If he's found guilty of negligent manslaughter? Absolutely.
Yeah.
If that was you or I, we'd already be in prison.
Sure.
So, there is absolutely a double standard in the justice system today. There absolutely
Yep.
And if for the most part, if you've got, if you're a fairly rich person, like in the case where Mr. Baldwin is, absolutely. Because people like him can afford to hire the absolute, these are $1,000 an hour criminal defense attorneys who know how to exploit the system.
Sure. Well, thank you much, John Francis, for this fine Friday. We'll have you on next week too. Whatever topic you want to talk about next week too,
Very well.
Well, thank you very much. D Shap in the morning on this fine Friday. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Take it easy.